said to my boss one day, I was like, if I don't quit, I'm not going to be here. And I don't think he quite realised how serious I was. And I sort of stressed it again, being like, if I don't quit, I don't know if I'm going to be alive.
So, Chris, looking fresh. How was your treatment?
Genuinely one of the most relaxing experiences I've had in quite a long time. An important thing to say about the treatment you get here is that it's almost like, it's kind of like therapy as well. It's relaxing. You end up connecting with your barber, and I think it's such an important thing for men to have that. It was quite intimate. The greatest challenge for men's health is education and conversation. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of incredible information out there, but a lot of men are not absorbing that information or realizing actually how useful those resources are out there. And Movember is providing some incredible resources which to do with men's physical and mental health. But I think the hardest thing is actually getting people to absorb that and read that. And us as guys, we're quite stubborn to the fact that we're good. We think we're good, we're invincible. In reality, we're not. And sometimes you just need to accept that and understand that there are people out there to support and help you, whether that is with your physical or mental health. There's a massive stigma about men showing emotion, and I would argue that it's a generational thing. I think it has got better, but like if I think of my granddad or my dad's generation, they didn't cry, they didn't show emotion, and that was a pressure from their dads, and it's kind of the thing that was passed down. I think there's been a better understanding to emotion and showing emotion, and I actually think we're getting to a point where a lot of guys are realizing that actually showing emotion and showing that you are upset and you do cry is actually a way stronger. It's not a sign of weakness, it is truly a sign of strength to be able to show, you're not always a superhero. The thing that I refer to quite a lot, which was I think heavily impacted me as a child and a young adult, I was probably 14, 15, and my dad was in a coma. My dad was a professional motorbike racer, and he had a very, very serious accident and nearly died. And that was something that I had to grow up very quickly to effectively look after my dad. But having to deal with that at what I would class as quite a young age was one of the hardest things I've ever dealt with. And I think it intentionally or unintentionally has shaped me to the person I am now. Going forward from that, when I worked as an architect, there was a lot of workplace bullying, I would argue, in one of the companies I worked at. And because from my experiences, and of course this is not everyone's experiences, but from my experiences, I found it quite racist, quite sexist, quite homophobic, and I really struggled with that. I couldn't understand that mentality and how you would treat someone in that kind of way. I had a very frank conversation with my boss at one point where I sort of said to him, I was at this point classed as highly depressed, as well antidepressants, and I said to my boss one day, I was like, if I don't quit, I'm not going to be here. And I don't think he quite realised how serious I was, and I sort of stressed it again, being like, if I don't quit, I don't know if I'm going to be alive, is how I explained it to him. I think the penny dropped, and he was like, I'm not going to let you quit, I'm going to make you redundant, because that way we can support you in whatever happens next, and financially support you with a payout so you can work out what you want to do next. That was when I left design and architecture, because for me, I realised that industry was not good for my own mental health, and I needed to find a way to escape that. And that for me, the escape was two reasons. It was leave the industry or leave being who I am, and I believe I'd made the right decision at the end of the day. I would say my friendships have definitely changed over the years. If I think about like from studying architecture and design to now, I would say I have a very small and close group of friends. We don't see each other very often. They live all around the world now, but we try and keep in touch. I think we quite often on like a Wednesday, we just send like video calls or video messages of what we're up to each other, which is just really nice, because it's that you don't necessarily have to talk in context of anything. It's just like what you're up to for the day, and you just have a chat, send a video, and it's nice because that person can just see what you're talking, hear your voice and see you and stuff like that. I'd say now I have a very small, close group of friends that we don't see each other very often, but actually when we do see each other, it's like nothing's changed, and there's been no time between when last time we saw. And I think as you grow older, you probably gravitate towards a group of people which do really become your family. And I would, my best friends are probably almost more family to me than my family are. They know all of the really tough times. They've seen all the really hard times and the bits where I've really struggled, and that kind of stuff. Maybe I know for a fact I definitely haven't opened up about that as much to my parents, because especially my dad, I always had that perception of like, it's that whole thing again about like, I don't think he would know how to react and respond to it, because he's very not great at sharing his emotions. It's quite hard to then talk to him about it, and the times that we have spoken has been where we've been doing things like sitting in a car where we're stuck in traffic, because it's that whole thing of not confrontational. You're sitting opposite, you're next to each other, so it felt easier to talk. As you get older, I think you end up gravitating towards a certain group of people, and they kind of become your world in a way. There's a few places I definitely would say I'm most comfortable in terms of opening up about me. One of them is riding on a bike, and I do think that cycling's always been a way to talk. I've always found it as a really easy way to talk and to speak and to have conversations with mates. All of my best mates ride. It's very easy for me to talk to them on a bike, because you're traveling, and I think there's something to do with the motion and the momentum of it means that the conversation kind of flows very easily. And as I said before, you don't necessarily look at someone in the eyes or anything, so I think it's easier to have those hard chats. I think there's subconsciously a huge amount of pressure as a man, and a pressure that's come from our parents and our parents' parents. It's a generational pressure to appear to be manly, whatever manly is. And that pressure is not necessarily showing feeling, not necessarily showing any form of weakness. I do think it's changing. I do think that barrier is kind of starting to erode away, but I think there is a pressure to be manly, effectively, to be the man. That probably isn't going to go away for a very long time, but I do feel like it's becoming better. The thing that I struggle with, I would say, is that because I'm not short, I'm relatively tall. I like to big myself up. I have a bit of height. I have tattoos, whether it's a moustache or a beard. I have some form of facial hair. I've definitely had points where people have almost like stereotyped and gone, oh, he's a bit of a thug, a bit of a bruiser. And in reality, like, it's the complete opposite. I watch dog videos and I burst into tears all the time. I cry very easily. That was something that I didn't do when I was younger, and actually I think is incredibly healthy. I've definitely found that people have stereotyped me from the fact that I have tattoos and stuff, and perceived that I'm maybe scary in some way. Pieces of advice that I've learned in terms of looking after my own mental health, and I think they are things that will help other people. Just take a moment to breathe and try and pull yourself out of the situation if you're getting overwhelmed, and just give yourself 5 minutes, not looking at a phone, not looking at any form of screen. I tend to do is quite often is just go and sit on a park bench and just 5 minutes. Allow yourself to have that bit of time and space. We're in a society where we don't necessarily appreciate how important it is to give that time to yourself. Time is the most valuable currency in the world. You can't buy it, you can't get it back. When it's gone, it's gone. So give yourself that opportunity to have that time, to allow yourself to just breathe and reset. And the other thing is, I guess, it's also from the perspective of a friend. If you have a friend that you think might be struggling, is just send a message, like whether it's a voice note, a WhatsApp, a text message, a phone call, whatever it is. It can be something really simple, just be like, how you doing? It doesn't have to be a long message, but that tiny act of kindness can completely change someone's day. The biggest thing for me is always be kind, always be gracious, and understand that being positive and kind towards other people can make a huge impact. In cycling, that one of the phrases which gets spoken about a lot is don't be a dick. And it's so simple as a rule, but it seems to be really hard to follow. And simply by not being a dick, you can really do a lot of good in the world. Everyone's too busy to send a message at the moment, it seems. But as I say, time is the most valuable currency. Use it wisely, don't waste it. People don't know what's going on behind closed doors. You never will, but you should always act the way that there might be something bad going on. So always be polite and courteous and just check in. The problem that men have about talking about their mental health is that concern of weakness. I think that's a huge problem with it. I think the historical and societal pressure of being a guy is the perception that you should be a strong person physically and mentally. You should be strong. But I think the only way that we can change it is by actually showing vulnerability as guys, putting it out there that actually vulnerability is not a weakness, it's a real sign of strength, because you're engaging with the fact that you are struggling and you are having a hard time. And by showing that, it shows other guys that there's no weakness in that. It is incredibly powerful to be honest and open and to show that you're struggling. I think that the perception is that, you know, showing any form of emotion is a negative thing, when actually emotions are a positive thing. Like, whether that is, you know, happy emotions or sad emotions, they are all positive because it shows you care. And ultimately that's the thing that we as guys need to engage with, is actually we do care. We really do care. And you should try and show that. And I'm not saying everyone should like allow yourself to show some emotion, because it's healthy. You bottle that stuff up and it's going to come out somehow. Things that get bottled up explode. That's not a good thing. The one piece of advice I would give myself to younger Chris is don't be afraid to cry, because I think I was definitely one of those younger guys that would not show any emotion and probably needed to, especially with the stuff that was going on with my dad. And I think when I was younger, especially when he was in the coma and everything, that I felt like I had to be the man of the family effectively. I've got 3 sisters and my mum and my stepmom, and I felt like I needed to sort of live up. He was no longer around, and behind, you know, bedroom door closed, I'd be crying my eyes out. But in reality, I wish I had shown that emotion to my sisters and my mum, because I don't think they truly realised how much I cared. So the best bit of advice I'd give to younger me was like, don't hold back the tears, let them out, like show that, because it means you care. Emotions are a healthy thing. There's no negative about emotions. They're incredibly healthy. And I wish when I was younger I had realised that. To be honest, I don't think I really realised that until I was probably in my mid-20s, that actually, for me as well, when I do these big like charity bike rides and stuff, the emotions is probably what gets me through a lot of it. That's almost a superpower for me, is actually having emotions, because it probably allows me to push further than I would if I was robotic. Because for me, riding a bike is a very good way to balance my own mental health. And if I'm very overwhelmed, I'll go for a bike ride and I'll count something random. So it could be road times, it could be the lines on the road. I just count stuff when I'm riding. And I think it works for me because it's a distraction. It seems, for me, it allows me to distract my brain from a lot of the noise that then allows me to reset and then be able to kind of compute where my head's at and kind of reduce whatever it is that's overwhelming me so much, be able to reduce that and manage it better, to kind of, because quite often when stuff's overwhelming you, it's just because you haven't quite figured out the order or the routine or what you need to do, or it's just a lot of stuff. Writing lists as well, that really helps me, just writing things down, lists of stuff, random things. For me, quite often it's about trying to get the stuff that's in my brain which is causing the stress, the anxiety out, and that can be from writing things down. I've always found that writing stuff feels like an easier way to get rid of that built up stress or pressure, whatever it's come from. Just writing things down, because there's something about it, because it's analog, that it feels disconnects better, and it comes out and goes through the ink of the pen. I don't think you truly absorb or release it in the same way if you were to type something, but writing it does seem to help me a lot. I'm a huge believer that places like Ted's Grooming Room are invaluable for supporting men talking about tricky conversations. Having your hair cut and a shave and everything like that is quite intimate, and you end up being very close to someone who is effectively helping you be a better version of yourself. I believe allows for conversation to come more freely. It's not necessarily with the barber you're working with, it could be with other people there as well. And there's not that many, what I would almost class as safe spaces for conversation to be easily shared. And, a barber's is one of those places where that can happen quite naturally. I've got a favourite moustache, Nigel Mansell. I actually have had several people told me that I look a little bit like Nigel Mansell as well. Obviously, I have to suggest him as my favourite moustache. He's one of the best. I hope he still has it. Pretty sure he does. My dad was racing motorbikes in the 80s, but he would have watched F1 and stuff in the 70s and stuff like that, right? So like, my dad referenced Nigel Mansell a lot in terms of like, best racer and all this kind of stuff. And in reality, like, I only saw bits of Nigel Mansell from things that like old VHSs that my dad would have had and played to us as kids and be like, oh, look, best racer. I just always thought he had a good moustache.